This video is sponsored by Incogni.
NATO members must finally contribute their fair share and meet their financial obligations. But 23 of the 28 member nations are still not paying what they should be paying and what they are supposed to be paying for their defense.
The year was 2017, and Trump, in his signature tone, was bemoaning Europe's failure to hit the famous 2% of GDP defense spending NATO guideline. It was a classic. Just look at all of these faces kind of knowing that on this occasion, Trump was sorta right. Fast forward to today, and he's at it again. But why stop at 2% where you can crank the dial up to a jaw-dropping 5%? Yes, 5%. A figure that not even the US, the loudest advocate for defense spending, is hitting. Ambitious, unrealistic, or just Trump being Trump? NATO's new Secretary General, Mark Rutte, known for his Dutch sensibility and practical solutions, didn't jump on the 5% bandwagon. In his first meeting with the European Parliament, Rutte played it cool. I don't want to commit a number, he said, but let's just say it will be north of 3%. North of 3%. That's not just a number, that's still a call to war on national budgets. And Rutte wasn't shy about pointing out where these funds could come from. The social systems. Healthcare, pensions, welfare. You know, the stuff people actually like. But wait, maybe he's got a point. Russia, for instance, is reportedly spending a fortune on defense. Estimates say north of 6% of GDP last year. And for years, NATO countries have been coasting on a post-Cold War neglect of their militaries. But the times are changing, and the message is clear. It's catch-up time. So will Europe open its wallets? And if so, by how much? 2%, 3%, or even 5%? And what do these percentages mean in real terms for defense spending? And most importantly, is this even realistic? So, what's the situation today? All the data we're using is from 2023, courtesy of SIPRI, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. Sadly, the 2024 data isn't available yet, only the estimates, so we will use the real figures from 2023 for now. Global spending currently sits at a staggering $2.4 trillion. Unsurprisingly, the US leads the pack, followed by China and then Russia. However, these figures are in current dollar terms, and if we consider purchasing power parity, PPP, which adjusts for differences in the cost of living and local prices, Russia and China's financial clout grows significantly. Now, let's zoom in on the EU. Collectively, EU countries spend about $312 billion, just about a third of what the US spends on its own. Yet among the world's top 8 defense spenders, only one EU country makes the list. Now here's a shocker. Ukraine is spending a jaw-dropping 37% of its GDP on defense. That's more than 1/3 of the country's entire economy. Here you can really see the immense strain of the ongoing war effort. And for our German viewers, defense spending in 2024 will likely hit the 2% NATO benchmark. To be fair, most countries are cranking up their defense budgets lately, so these numbers are likely to be a bit higher now. Still, despite these increases, the numbers reveal a stark reality. When adjusted for PPP, Russia's defense spending is nearly on par with the entire EU's combined efforts. For a region facing such an aggressive neighbor, this really is a serious concern. As for NATO, the numbers look stronger. With the might of the US included, total spending hits $1.35 trillion, a significantly larger figure, but still not immune to pressures of growing threats. Now the proposals. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has suggested a minimum of 3% GDP spending for NATO members. Let's crunch the numbers and see what this would mean for NATO as a whole, the EU, and its member states. But before that, people who've been following my channel for a while know I've talked a lot about the EU's strict data regulations. But despite these rules, your data is not as secure as you'd think. For instance, I keep getting bombarded by scam calls and scam emails, like those fake DHL ones, asking me to pay for a delivery I never ordered. The worst part? I nearly fell for it, especially during the Christmas time. That's when I realized how much of my personal information was floating around out there, available to people I didn't even know existed. Enter today's sponsor, Incogni. This isn't just a spam blocker, it's your personal data cleanup crew. Incogni hunts down shady data brokers, demand they remove your info, and even wrestle with objections if needed. And the best part? They keep coming back to ensure your data stay off those lists, no matter how sneaky those data brokers get. And here's the cherry on top. Go to incogni.com/EUMadeSimple and use my code EUMadeSimple and get 60% off. So, protect your privacy in 3 simple steps. Sign up, let Incogni handle the messy stuff, and sit back while they keep you safe. Check out the link in the description and say goodbye to scams for good. So, based on the 2023 GDP values, let's apply the 3% GDP spending guideline for NATO members only. Expenditure on defense would look like this. Significant increases for the European NATO members. And if we reorder the top 7, there will be a complete reshuffle in the global rankings. Germany would be catapulted to 3rd place worldwide, nearly doubling its 2023 spending. The UK would go up to 5th place, and France would make the top 7 too, moving to 6th. For the United States, nothing changes. They're already spending 3.4% of GDP, well above the 3% guideline. In total, the EU's defense spending would nearly double, dramatically enhancing its capabilities. NATO too would see a significant boost, with almost all additional funds coming from the increased contributions of EU countries and Canada. Now, I know what you Europeans are thinking. Where does my country stand in this grand NATO plan? Don't worry, we've got you covered. Here are the top 8 EU countries by spending, assuming everyone steps up to the 3% mark. If you want to see the other EU countries, find the Google Sheets in the video description. But what happens if we take things further? Let's dive into Trump's scenario, 5% of GDP spending. Honestly, this is where things start to get a little insane. Military budgets would skyrocket to levels that can only be described as, well, kind of scary. The rankings would shift again, with more NATO members and EU countries climbing toward the top of the list. What's striking is that the US doesn't even spend 5% of its GDP on defense today. If Trump's scenario became reality, US defense spending would jump by an eye-watering $400 billion, reaching $1.4 trillion in total. Germany would hold on to 3rd place, spending an astonishing $219 billion, while the UK would claim 4th place, followed closely by France and then Italy. And the EU and NATO, they would transform into absolute powerhouses. The EU's total defense spending would rival what the US spends today, and NATO as a whole, brace yourself, it would command a military budget of $2.6 trillion. That's double the current level. Pretty crazy, right? But is this kind of spending even remotely realistic? Many NATO countries have indeed acknowledged the need for increased defense spending. But let's just say the 5% figure hasn't exactly won them over. Take Italy, for example. The Italian defense minister quickly dismissed the idea, calling it impossible for all nations worldwide. Italy is spending 1.57% of GDP on defense this year, with a slow climb to 2% by 2028. But then there's Poland, hold my beer they say, as they're forecasted to spend 4.1% in 2024 and aim to boost that to 4.7% this year, making them the closest to Trump's target of any NATO country. Spending generally increases the closer a country is to Russia, and the Baltic states are leading the charge. Estonia, for instance, is committing 3.7% of GDP this year and appears open to considering Trump's ambitious target. Scandinavian countries are also on board with upping their budgets. Sweden, for example, which is forecasted to have spent 2.1% of GDP on defense last year, sees more spending as a great idea. But not everyone is in such a strong position. Germany is scrambling to meet the 2% goal again this year, and many other European nations are grappling with budget constraints. France, for instance, faces challenges in boosting its defense spending as political uncertainty disrupts the budget process. Meanwhile, the Czech Republic just announced it will hit 2% for the first time ever, and is already considering 3% in several years' time. So yeah, in short, Europe is divided on this, as is kind of becoming the norm. At EU Made Simple, I actually agree with Trump. Well, to an extent. Let's be honest, 5% is a little crazy. But I think Trump's 5% is more of a high-stakes opening bid, designed to kick off months of heated negotiations. Realistically, I think he'll likely settle for something closer to 3%. A new target is likely to be agreed at a NATO summit in The Hague in June later this year. But regardless of the number, let's ask the real question. Are we spending enough today? And the answer is a resounding no. And Trump has a point. It's not fair to rely on US soldiers to handle our defense for us. Frankly, it's kind of ridiculous. Of course, in an ideal world, we wouldn't need weapons at all. But let's face it, with an aggressive, powerful neighbor like Russia, we do not have that luxury. Western Europe, especially Germany, has been phenomenal at one thing: putting its head in the sand. Super high welfare? Check. Relying on the US military umbrella? Double check. Cheap resources from Russia while also building dependency on China? Triple check. Frankly, it's no wonder the situation has finally boiled over. It's time for Europe to take matters in its own hands. More defense spending? Absolutely. But here's the thing. Maybe we need to do more together. Does it really make sense for 27 member states to independently procure tanks, jets, and ships? Probably not. What we really need is a more common foreign policy and defense strategy. How, you ask? Well, we've got a video coming soon on exactly that, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and like this video for more updates. Let us know in the comments what you think NATO countries should spend: 3%, 5%, or something else entirely. Don't forget to check out Incogni, an amazing tool to protect your online privacy. And to support us further, consider joining us on Patreon. Every contribution helps us bring you more in-depth discussion on Europe's future. Thank you to our presidents, Jan, Sjoukje, Kristin, Peter, AGVD, BJ, and Ollie. See you in the next video.